we're going to cover how to analyze a deal end to end and quickly realize if something is a deal or not. And then we'll go through all the numbers together. Now, if you don't know who we are, if you ask ChatGPT, what's the best podcast to learn about affordable housing investments and who is it hosted by, you will get our podcast and yours truly. Now, the reason I want to do this today is because, well, my first year of going live, I analyzed the deal every single day for probably 400 days in a row, probably. So now that you've seen I'm covering different types of topics from like how do we publish the podcast to how we get it ranked, I always go back to analyzing deals because it's such a core skill that I feel like everybody should have. Again, this is not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. Just simply showing you what I'm doing every day to show you that, hey, these are the things that you can probably learn and understand. Right now, today I'm looking at an area 27614, but I'm looking in this area in Raleigh because I have a friend who invests there. And I just figured, hey, let me look at some properties. And the easiest way that I have found, and I'll go through the entire process from end to end, but the easiest way that I found to run a deal, if, right, very specific, if your goal is to pursue cash flow, which means you're getting some sort of passive cash flow every single month from your rental properties, well, you got to learn how to look at a single family home, right? Then let's start at very basics before you go into the very complicated multifamily apartment building deals. Now, this property is 8253 Merriweather Circle in Raleigh, North Carolina, 27616. So the first thing I would do is I would look for two data points. First is the market rent. And I would always go to affordablehousing.com. I would go to the owner section. I would go to the rental estimate, plug in the address, plug in the bedroom count, and I can see right here that on average for 21 units within a 0.51 mile radius, the average rent is 1412, 1412. All right. So that's a really important factor because that's the number I want to analyze my deal around and really focus on that number. But there's one more number that you need to look up. And if you were to look up Raleigh Housing Authority or whatever city or whatever county you're in and housing authority and the payment standards, right? You will see right here by bedroom count, by zip code, right? Zip count, by bedroom count. You see two bedrooms right here, 1710. Now, the payment standards sometimes is higher than what you see on the market rent, which is what you saw here, because usually the payment standards include the amount that a tenant is expected to pay for rent and utilities. So if you don't include utilities, typically a housing authority, which is the governing body that kind of issues your Section 8 vouchers or was previously known as Section 8 vouchers, they're now called housing choice vouchers, that allows you to figure out, hey, what do I need to back out of my utility allowance, right? If I don't cover water for a two-bedroom townhome or apartment or single family home, what do I need to deduct from the ceiling rent? So because there's a test called the rent reasonableness test, and I can kind of share with you what is HUD rent reasonableness test, right? This definition is basically you're ensuring that a unit that's supported by grant funds or housing subsidies from the HUD housing choice vouchers is not more expensive than a similar unit. So you can't charge more rent to someone simply because they are a voucher holder, right? Which is very, very important for the obvious reasons. So that's why when I analyze this deal, I have to use 1412. Now, if I were to quickly analyze this deal and say, hey, is this worth my time pursuing further? I mean, it's really easy for you to use the 1% rule, which means that for a property that you can get $1,400 in rent, you don't want to pay more than $140,000 for that property, right? Just a very quick rule of thumb. But obviously, other factors matter, especially if you are renting or buying a property with an HOA. So let's go ahead and analyze this deal, right? So right then and there, I could have ruled it out, but let's go deeper into the numbers so you can figure out, hey, what does it mean? Why did I rule it out? And how do I actually proceed going forward? All right. So if you guys want to follow along, just go to affordablehousing.io, go to the Get Deal Analysis tool, and you get a copy of the spreadsheet. That's a fast way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just plug it in and do it alongside with me. All right. So this property is being listed for $209,000. So I'll put that in B4 of the spreadsheet. More renovations. Let's take a quick look at this property. I'm going to delete that plus analysis because I was just showing someone a scenario. Now, for the most part, I mean, it's got some carpet, but for the most part, it's in a decent shape, right? It's got some flooring, it's got some carpet on the bedrooms, but it's not a deal breaker. Okay. Now, what I'll then do is I'll go to rehab calculator, and what I typically do, right, on single family homes, I would typically put aside $1,500 for roof repairs because any property that I've ever bought before, I've always done some sort of repair to the roof. So in this case, it's part of a condo, right? It's part of a it's like an attached townhome. Oh, single family. So it's actually in a gated community. Pretty sure it's a town. That's why they kind of took this picture this way. So what they will do is, well, your HOA typically covers some sort of maintenance for that area. And in that scenario, let's say I'm assuming the paint is in pretty good shape. I'll probably set aside like 250 square feet for painting that needs to get done. I'll probably set aside 250 square feet for the carpet that I want to replace eventually. But again, I don't need to do this right away because the carpet looks like it's in decent shape. I'll also take aside two toilets that I'll probably put in a pressure assisted toilet because I don't want to get called for clogged toilet calls. So one of the reasons I want to do this is because I want to figure out, hey, what's my best initial investment that allows me to save my time, my energy, so that I don't get called for those clogged toilet calls and wasting my time, my energy, or anything like that. Right? Sometimes people underestimate that if you get a call in the middle of the night and it's a clogged toilet call, it's really annoying. So and you don't want to handle that, right? So we got that in place. And now what do we have? We got a rough budget of $4,500 just setting aside in case I need any repairs. In B16, I have the rents that I got from the payment calculator right here on affordablehousing.com. And then in my taxes, I can get this estimate right over here from my payment calculator on Redfin, which is 148 for taxes, 148. And then for my insurance, it's got 94. I'll put in $94 right here. Typically, I try to add a little bit extra. So I'll do equals 94 times 1.2. And I'm adding a 20% premium because I'm assuming that $94 was an estimate for an insurance quote for someone that lives there as a primary residence. And if I'm not using it as a primary residence and I'm using it as an investment property, typically insurance companies will view that as a riskier asset. So they'll charge a higher premium, right? Just a natural occurrence, how it goes. Then from HOA is 118. So I'll do that in B34 because I have HOA already. I'm not going to do my typical 10, 11% of maintenance because I'm already setting aside a good amount of money for my HOA fee. That might cover some of my maintenance, like lawn, siding, roof repairs, right? Some of your bigger items. But hey, your maintenance should never be zero. Doesn't matter what your HOA fee is because, I mean, especially if you're a long-term buy and hold investor, you know at some point someone's going to at some point something's going to break inside your home. So it's almost irresponsible for you to not put maintenance, not count it as your expenses, because then you'll be underestimating your expenses and overestimating your profitability. And you might be thinking, I'm making all this money, but then all of a sudden you get this big repair for a roof and you just realize, oh, I didn't make any money in the last 5 years. And that's not the thing I want for you. All right. So hopefully this is helpful for everybody. Again, for my property management expenses, typically I will put in 10%. Very common. Now, some folks might try to analyze a deal and not have any property management expenses in there. I think that's a mistake because usually people are pursuing real estate for passive income. And if you don't underwrite with some margin for property management expenses, then you have essentially bought yourself a job. Right? These are real expenses. Because if rent never went up again and you want to offload those responsibilities, guess what? You can't do that. It doesn't work like that anymore. All right. So that's 10% for property management expenses. I got 5% for vacancy because someone will always leave your home, right? Doesn't matter if it's natural causes of death or sometimes people just move on, right? They move out. They have different lives, different needs, different situations. So you got to have some vacancy expenses in there because you will have time when you are not collecting rent, and that's a real expense. Sometimes, right? I've seen folks out there that teaches this stuff professionally, and they'll say, "Oh, my rent is this, my debt service, which means my principal and my interest taxes and insurance is this, and that's my cash flow. But they always leave out the maintenance, HOA, property management expenses, because they might be self-managing. They might leave out their vacancy expenses. That's a big no-no because those are real expenses. All right. So let's go ahead here. In closing costs, I got 2.5%, which is in E22, so 0.025 times B4, which is my listing price. My down payment percentage here in F19 is 25%. So I'll be putting in $52,250. Now, on this situation right here, my financing amount in case 6 is going to equals B4 minus my down payment amount in E19. So I'll be financing $156,750, assuming my price stays the same. Now, I'm analyzing with a 6.5% interest rate right now. That fluctuates all the time. But if that is the case, right, and I bought it for 209, I'll be a negative 4.9% return, right? So think about it. So at 1412, if I bought this property for 209, I'd be losing $254 a month after these expenses. It's a negative 4.9% return, assuming a $5,000 rehab, just rounding up here, 25% down, 6.5% interest rate. All right. Now let me do one lever for you. You might be wondering, like, well, how do I know if something's a deal? Right? If I lower my asking price to call it $130,000, right? That gets me to a 4% return. If I go to $120,000, $100,000. Well, now all of a sudden at 105, let's say my target return was 8%. Now I'm at 110 grand, 108, right? 7.9%. That rounds up to 8. So at 108, that might be a deal for someone. Now, does that mean someone's going to accept your offer for 108 when it's asking for 209? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. But that's okay. At least now you know, right? But at least now you know what the levers are you have to pull if you had to meet your target return of 8%. Again, I'm not saying 8% is a magical number. I'm just simply showing you whatever your target return is, how do you adjust the levers accordingly so that you meet the numbers that you're looking for. All right. Let's do 2 more scenarios. Let's say, right, you self-manage your property. So you delete these property management. Sorry. So now you can start seeing why people think something is a deal when you don't think it's a deal. Because someone that might be self-managing the property, they don't consider the self-management or the property management as an expense. So now it's in, right, look at how much the cash flow per month jumped up. So now all of a sudden your cash and cash return went up. So now all of a sudden, because you're self-managing and you don't include that as your expenses, right? Now all of a sudden that same property that you said, I'm only going to pay 108 for, I'm now willing to pay 130 grand because I don't have property management expenses because I'm paying that myself. So this is why you get such a big discrepancy in what someone calls a deal when it might not be a deal for you. And you're like, what am I missing? Well, you have to look at auto levers and understand from them, like, hey, what are you including in that number, right? What are you including in that monthly number? Okay. Now let's mess around a little bit more. So I took out the self-management expenses, right? Okay. Now what if the interest rates drop by another 0.5 point to 6% in K7? See how your cash and cash return number just went up in E9? Well, now you might be saying, now I'm going to pay 140 grand. No, 137. Let's see. 136. So that still rounds up to 8%. Now, because my interest rate dropped by 0.5 point to just 6%, right? Everything else is the same. But now I'm paying $136,000 instead of 130. Because I'm still getting 7.6% return on this deal, right? Again, no property management expenses from the last scenario here. 21412, now 266. All right. So that's how you adjust up and down the levers and keep your emotions out of the analysis process so you can figure out, hey, what is the right approach here? I'll do one more. Let's say all of a sudden you say, hey, my home is nicer, it's nicer than the rest. And when I talk to a property management company, I think I can get $1,500 in rent instead of $1,412 because my property looks a lot nicer. Well, see how the cash and cash return number just jumped up again? So now all of a sudden you might say, hey, maybe I'm at 150 grand. There you go. 148. 148 grand. And now I'm a 7.7% return, right? With a $1,500 rent. And now I'm at $291 a month. And now I'm at $148,000. $148,000 with $5,000 rent, 25% down, 6% interest rate. So I hope this is helpful for everybody, all right? You have to pay attention to two factors, right? The 30-year mortgage rate is affected by two factors. One is the interest rate on the 10-year yield, and second is the spread between the 10-year yield and the 30-year mortgage interest rates. 10-year yield. Now, historically, that spread has been about 1.5% to 2%, and now it's kind of getting back into it. Okay, now it's 2024, and now you can see the spread right here is about a little bit less than 2%. So that spread's back to normal. So pay attention to what's happening to the 10-year yield because the bond market is going to move much faster than your Federal Reserve. So some folks will be like, oh, when's the Federal Reserve cutting rates? When's the Federal Reserve cutting rates? But you have to understand that they are lagging on indicators. They're following what the indicators like the labor data, what the inflation data is, and they adjust the 10-year yield accordingly based on some macro conditions. Like you got big spikes and big spreads when there are big tariff announcements, right? So you have to understand what's going on to figure out how to interpret it. And the bond market will move way faster, all right? So hopefully it's helpful for everybody. Again, my hope is that you copy my homework, right? You analyze the same deal I analyzed today using the same spreadsheet, and that allows you to figure out what's a step that you can take to decide when or something to do. All right. I hope you all have an amazing day. Thanks for being on all my lives for 850 days in a row. Let's keep this going. All right. Have an amazing day, everybody. I hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today because that's what life is all about. Have a good one, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow for day 851. Have a good one.